So I did an entire episode on privileged white male global domination. Just think of this as like a phone call, really, because that's the kind of angle that I'm coming at it. Just a normal conversation that I want to have. So in that episode, I talked about it, and that was kind of like me hitting the tip of the iceberg, really. Like, that was me hitting the tip of the iceberg within and addressing a bit of a like global conversation, I guess, about systemic racism and systemic oppression, and I guess just having an opinion about it, because what else are you gonna do as a fucking human being, right? After that episode, I listened to it a few more times, and I listened to the other episodes. Throughout the podcast, I kind of talk about Shawn Mendes and my thoughts and opinions about like where he actually stands when it comes to systemic oppression and when it comes to systemic racism. In that part of me, really, not even part of me, but that in many ways I feel like he's contributing to the karmic imbalance and the injustice that exists within our system of government. And I think I just want to elaborate a little bit more, because like I said in the last episode, because I was hitting the tip of the iceberg, it was a lot more like emotional, and I was kind of going through like a lot of revelations, and you can kind of hear it through the episode of me sort of realizing, having a lot of epiphanies about my support for Shawn and the nature of whatever connection that I feel to him in all of this, right? So this episode is going to be a part 2 to privileged white male global domination, right? And me kind of telling a little bit more about my story and why this is important and all of that, yada, 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 what makes it relevant. And just, really have more of an evolved conversation of the last one, okay? Now that's out of the way. I was thinking about last night about how I sort of feel guilty. Like, really, like, it hurts my heart to say these things about Shawn. To even, like, partially even think that he could be a racist, or in my mind that he's seen as an oppressor. And then I've been thinking really hard about whether I actually want to post these episodes, because I just felt like, who am I to say what this man isn't and what he is? And who am I to blame some kind of internal feeling of oppression on him, right? And who he is, and like, who am I? What gives me the right to shit on this man's name like this and fuck up his reputation of being an ally, of being someone who supported the Black community? And I was just feeling really, 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 really heartbroken about it and torn, because I'm like, me being quiet about the experience doesn't help anyone. That's one thing that I feel like I came to the conclusion of, that if I'm having this experience and it's taught me, like, and the thing is, it's not even necessarily about Shawn. I think for me, in my reality, Shawn is serving as a mirror, as a reflection, and that allows me to see an even greater sort of relationship, and the nature of that relationship, the Black community, the Black race, and their connection to our system of government, and how that dynamic works. And a lot of people may think, well, how the hell does Shawn Mendes relate to the government? In my reality, like I said, it kind of serves as a reflection, a mirror that has allowed me to see versions of myself that there's no way I could be aware of if I hadn't been in love with fucking Shawn Mendes and had consistently allowed this love to kind of guide me into this sort of unknown version of myself and then be able to relate this unknown version of myself to the experience, the shadow experience, I feel like, that I have of this version of myself in the world. And then how does that experience relate me to the people of my community who share my same race, who share my same culture, who share my same background, yada, 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 right? So yeah, I'm just feeling like ass, right? Like, I just feel really, really, really fucked up about saying all these things about Sean and having any kind of personal opinion on his character. But as I sat and I started to realize that, like, the injustice is not done, right? Like, through me speaking up about it. I think the injustice is me not saying anything at all. In many ways, me speaking up about what I have learned because of my observation of Sean over a long period of time has really allowed me, like, me expressing everything that I have learned to the fullest capacity has genuinely gifted me with a greater awareness and a greater understanding of how systemic racism works, right? And that's kind of the bottom line, in that if I deprive my community of all of the knowledge that I have obtained about our nature and our reflection just as a whole, and our connection to our system of government and how it relates to us and our feeling of being a victim, if I keep all of that information away from being expressed, like expressing all of that, it does more harm than good in reality, and it only keeps me enslaved to my own self-depreciating thought patterns. And so I was really thinking about how the injustice that I feel like is being done, and like the ways that I feel like Sean is cooperating with this system of racism, right? This systemic racism, this systemic oppression, is that I really had to take a moment and like think about everything that I've expressed up until this point, because my episodes don't really work in like a logical way. Like, you'll hear me talk about the dark side of my Stan relationship and my support for Sean, like the dark side of it, and you'll get a lot of me expressing a lot of the light also. But I have to be able to take all of that for what it is and not really judge either or and say, okay, well, if I figured out the dark, then all of my support for him must be darkness. Or if I just ignore the dark and only see the light, and then I say, well, I won't say anything about the dark because of all this light. No, I have to take all of it and accept it for what it is if I want to truly gain an understanding of my own self. And so that's kind of where it began. Me realizing that I can't judge all of the dark aspects of Sean's personality that I come to discover because of my own internal, like, battle with self-worth, and me figuring out myself, me empowering myself, figuring out how to empower myself. And that through this process of empowerment, self-empowerment, I have come to find a very dark aspect of the support that I have for Sean. Or yeah, that sounds about right. I was gonna change it, but no, that sounds pretty correct. And then also understanding that if I hadn't had this fucking obsession, and if I hadn't had this all-consuming love for him, then I wouldn't have been able to understand the version of myself that feels worthless and needs his music, needs his voice, needs his interviews, needs his fame and his happiness, like, need him to be Superman, right? Like, understanding that version of myself and then overcoming, right? Like, enlightening myself on those thoughts. I can't strip from my support for Sean any love. Like, that's where I've come. Although in my previous episodes, you will hear me say a lot of different things that may contradict that statement. But ultimately, all of that is me kind of digging out all of the dirt and getting off all of the confusion and the cloudiness around my support for him, and what it means to me and the purpose of it in my reality. So again, kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, if I take away, like if I choose to say, oh, this isn't love, like, oh, this, what I'm experiencing with Sean can't possibly be love because I'm experiencing both dark and light, right? Like there's no way I could love him if I'm seeing this dark aspect of his personality, and in reality, like I'm seeing him as a source in my life that has been feeding on my energy, that's been feeding on my hopelessness, feeding on my worthlessness in order to like raise himself up, in order to create some kind of glory, but in the same, like with the same amount of passion and the same amount of expression and the same amount of effort and love and time. I have also found all of the versions of like myself that has seen in Sean a reason to fucking stay alive. Just that by itself, it gifted me with a greater understanding of the nature of love, just in general, in that we are taught that if you find even an ounce of darkness in someone and you may figure out an aspect of their personality that you don't like, you find that this person doesn't have an awareness of how this part of their personality affects you, right? Then you're like, it's this kind of programmed and conditioned perspective of like something not being love because it has both light and dark, because it gives you the experience of both life and death. And if I'm being honest, if at any point I had chose to say, okay, well, this is not love, which before I did, but that was like a part of the understanding. Like I had to get through the hatred in order to really, again, see it as love to an extent, and not necessarily love from Sean or me even loving Sean. Like I don't think it really has anything to do with Sean like as an individual, but more of like nature. And that I feel like the love more so is a process of self-discovery that is gifted to me through this sort of meditative path and journey that I've been taking by studying my connection to Sean and how I feel connected to him. I don't know if I'm talking in circles, but like none of this is logical. So I want to be able to explain all of my thoughts to the depth of meaning that they really have within, and leave no room for assumption, truthfully, and to give a complete and like accurate expression of the evaluation, like self-evaluation process that I've been going through, right? And so I had to also understand that like externally, if you look at everything before my podcast, I have a lot of videos about Sean. I have a lot of things talking about Sean because I'm a fucking stan and I'm a fangirl, right? So, in all of those aspects, I have praised him and I've spoken a lot about his light. But then I had to realize, like, Amina, here's the thing. I've noticed that there was a dark aspect of his personality because I could feel a sense of hopelessness whenever I would like see him on social media, or like I would scroll or any of that. And I don't know, like in one of my YouTube videos, in a lot of them, honestly, I talk a little bit about this kind of psychic ability that I have to see in a very simple definition, masculine and feminine energies, that like I can see those two energies at work in a person and how they move, how they interact, how they are creating an individual's personality, how they are creating the visible version of them and how they're creating the invisible version of them, and how this has been something that's really put a completely different experience of myself into my daily life, my daily routine, my practice of self-awareness. And so because everything that I see in a person really helps me understand the nature of my own dark and light, my own masculine, feminine, my own life and death and all those things, right? And a lot of this is really connected to my practice of Taoism or Taoism, however you prefer to say it. It is Taoism. But I say Taoism because it resonates that way on my tongue. I went a little bit on a tangent there, but it goes to kind of explain why this deep, thorough examination of my own kind of support and love for Sean has been so important, because I've been kind of studying his masculine and feminine energies and how they appear to me. Because so that's what I was talking about, right? I was saying how I could see his masculine energy, and the way that it appears, it's very, very dominant. Let's just say that, okay? Like his feminine energy is I remember the first time I had saw this ability in full effect, and it was when I was watching his Zane Lowe interview. I'm really gonna go into the deepest, okay, talk here, and a very, very elaborate and eloquent and detailed, thorough explanation of my entire fucking thought process up until this moment, and everything that I have learned and what it means and the purpose of it, okay? So sit tight, right? So I was watching the Zane Lowe interview, right? And this was in February 2022, but this interview came out in 2020, when Wonder was first being released, and I hadn't watched it. That I did not want to look at Sean at all during any time before 2022, because I just felt very, very sad. Very sad. Something about him just didn't feel happy. I don't know. And it just didn't work out internally. And no. So anyways, I hadn't actually started paying attention to Sean again until 2022. And when I finally watched this Wonder interview, I remember seeing it days and days and days, and I remember not clicking it, and then finally kind of caving in and clicking on it, and immediately I could see this the way that it looks. And I feel this is why practicing learning more about Taoism for me, and how it is more than sort of just a form of religious kind of practice, but it is legitimately what I am. When I'm looking at him, I'm seeing this shade of dark, and mind you, on the screen it's him and then it's Zane, right? And they're the way that the camera angle goes is that sometimes it'll show them in the same shot, or it'll show Zane by himself and then it'll show Sean by himself. But every time that Sean was on the camera, I could see the shadow of dark, this cast, and I perceived that to be his masculine energy. And then on the other side, there's this shade of white, fluorescent type of, almost transparent, but it's like smoke. That's, if I could compare it to a substance or the nature of feminine energy, it would be kind of like smoke, or how I perceive it when I'm seeing it in someone. And then the masculine will act more of a shadow. And seeing both of these energies in him began to become more and more and more evident as time went on and months started going by, and I kept studying his interviews and listening to his music and all of those things, right? And the thing is, the way I feel masculine and feminine energy works in a man is similar yet completely different than how it acts in a woman. So, mind you, I'm studying the masculine and feminine energies of a man, which is Sean. And I remember being afraid to kind of look at his masculine energy, and I would literally have to turn my face away, and I had to kind of overcome my fear of looking at him. literally, like, even though I loved him so much more than anything, I could see the face of his masculine energy, and it terrified me. It felt like I was being consumed or something. like his masculine energy is very much so dominant, like, and he even talks about like trying to, or more like self-control, and him learning how to be a better man, in a sense of like being the good guy, I guess. And him, I guess, showing a lot more of his feminine side as opposed to his masculine side, because I think that a lot of his masculine energy is so aggressive. And this relates to this kind of feeling of worthlessness that I was feeling, because I started to understand that a lot of why I love him is because when I am hopeless, like, there is this version of him in my head, right, who like will only ever allow me to experience any type of joy or happiness so long as it is through him or his art. I guess I started to increase an awareness of this perception of him, like the version of him that feeds on my worthlessness, that feeds on my energy, which I perceive to be is his masculine energy. But in reality, that is kind of the nature of masculinity. Like, it feeds on the feminine. It feeds on submission. It feeds on attention. It consumes, right? Like, in reality, the universe is a very large entity that is consistently expressing itself and then consuming that which is expressed, and then expressing it and then consuming, and then expressing and consuming, and expressing and consuming. And this process allows the universe to be all-knowing, because this constant like flow of expression and then consumption creates a consciousness and allows for a reflection to sort of exist. And this is where the knowledge comes from. It creates an awareness of everything that is expressed, and then a sort of interpretation of it. There has to be one in order to create the other. Like, for instance, I would have to consistently exist in this state of worthlessness. Like, my hopelessness would have to be something that is maintained in some way, in some shape, or in some form, for me to believe in somebody like Sean having the power to make a change. Because a lot of his privilege and a lot of his ability to make this change, like a lot of his potential, right? Like, all of what gives him the opportunity to be successful in kind of making a global impact and reaching a larger audience, everything that gives him that, a lot of that stems from me not having any of those things, or more so like my thoughts and my beliefs that are from a vibration of feeling worthless, of feeling hopeless, of feeling like there's no way I could succeed at all. And so I started to think about all of the brown girls in the world, right, who are victims of the system of oppression, and how we are more likely to get put in situations where we are exploited for our power and our voices and our bodies and our fucking intelligence. And I start thinking about how many brown girls in the world exist and are not aware of everything that makes them a force of nature. I guess something that I genuinely want to do is just create like a resource, okay? A resource in the form of knowledge, like a foundation, but not in a way where it has anything to do with any tangible, okay? Like, exchange of money or power or any of that, but knowledge, just to give a basis of knowledge that brown girls, for me, like, because this is genuinely like where my experience is. I'm a brown girl, okay? And this is me learning about myself in the world, learning about all of my own strengths, my own weaknesses, and creating justice in a way that allows me to restore power into all the brown girls in the world. And so I feel like the only way justice will ever be served is if every brown girl walks into a room with the highest possible state of consciousness, right? Like, she has the greatest awareness in every room that she walks in, because there are so many systems that are put in place that feed on our feeling of worthlessness, that feed on our feeling of hopelessness, whether it be the music industry, whether it be the modeling industry, whether it be our system of government, whether it be social media, doesn't matter. Any form of system, any form of business, any type of source, right, that asks for our investment has the potential to oppress us without our knowledge, okay, without our knowing. And in many ways we are met with a lot of situations where we put ourselves in danger, where we are put in very, very vulnerable situations, where we become victims of oppression, where we become victims of abuse, where we become victims of where we are exploited, right? Because there is a lot about ourselves, and there are a lot of versions of ourselves, let's say that, higher versions of ourselves that are kept on the other side of a closed door, a mental door, and that we get locked inside of this room of ourselves that keeps us feeling hopeless and feeling worthless, and that we are willing to give our power to feed anything, right? To feed anything and anyone who is willing to give us a moment, just a tiny little moment of feeling like we are seen, like we are heard. And so there are a lot of different things. As a brown girl, you kind of have to, well, for me, have gained the most amount of awareness by teaching myself all of the ways that my hatred for my oppressor keeps me enslaved to him. How all of the ways that my hatred for my oppressor keeps me a victim of his oppression. How all of the ways that my hatred for my oppressor is already an injustice to myself. Because that hatred will always serve as a burden, as a mental burden, as a chain, right, that keeps me linked to him like a fucking dog on a leash. That my mind will always be under his control, and what it is that I know about myself will always only be what he brings into the light, right? And the key as a brown girl is to really get to all of the versions of yourself that are hidden, that are unseen. You want to know how you think, how all of the versions of you think, right, that see him as more powerful. What is it, right? And all of the versions of you that are willing to ask the government for power, right? And all of the versions of you that are willing to take help from anyone. Because this is the thing, like, as brown girls, we are 100% the most self-aware human beings across space and time. And I believe this wholeheartedly. But the thing is that awareness is sort of disabled by this feeling of victimization, of feeling victimized. and oppressed that we only become aware of the version of ourselves that is oppressed. And we become enslaved to their thought patterns, like the version of ourselves, right? As a brown girl, the version of you who is a brown girl and is oppressed and lives in this world that looks at you and already sees hopelessness in your skin color, that sees insecurity in your hair, and sees all of these ways to make you feel like you have absolutely no value, right? And then the way that the system works is that it will then program, right? It will implement these programs, set into place these programs, like charities, like foundations, like some kind of global conversations, right? It will put in place systemic like resources. These resources that are based on a system where the energy flows from you into a thing, right? And that this thing feeds on your energy and creates the illusion that it gives to the world, that it creates a better world, but really it just takes from you, right? And we see this a lot in the music industry. If I'm being honest, you see a lot of brown women who go into the industry and give it their fucking all. And that ultimately we think that is somehow creating an expansion, you know, that, oh, we're getting more color in the music industry and there's more female rappers and more celebrities and this and that, but they all end up having to conform to the same image. They all end up having to conform to the same sound of sexualization, and, you know, like it strips them of all of their ability to truly know who the fuck they actually are. Because a lot of their image is based on what is profitable. A lot of what is seen as a powerful Black woman in today's society is the complete opposite of everything that makes her natural. Everything that is natural about her. And see where the disconnect comes between these systems and their desire to profit off of us is that they think what is natural is our insecurities. Is everything that makes us feel worthless, everything that makes us feel hopeless, like that is what they perceive as natural, right? Like to a system of oppression, what is a natural Black girl is not her with her curls out. It's not her without makeup. It's not her looking like she is self-aware. No, it looks like the version of her that is insecure. The version of her that doesn't know her worth. The version of her that's willing to do anything in order to be seen. To feel value, especially when it comes to oppression, right? Like the oppressor does not just look like a man, even though I have been saying he. That is just because my individual experience has been through my observation of a man, which is Shawn Mendes. But again, through this surrender to viewing this love for him as a reflection of something greater, I have been able to understand global, right? Like global beliefs and systems and programs that are set in place to sustain a racist and unjust and imbalanced world, and to keep the brown woman feeling like the world would never change. And that's the thing, it's this promise, right? Like we are always promised this like image of innovation, this image of awareness, right? Like people try to make their seem more aware of like people, the systems, right? It will portray to you some kind of sense of injustice, like some kind of understanding of injustice and understanding of oppression from your perspective, in a awareness of all the ways that the world continuously makes you hate yourself. They will pretend to understand what it feels like, right? They will pretend, and then on top of that, they will use that, right? Like use your own feeling of worthlessness to sell you a world, sell you a dream, right? Sell you a reality where you will always be mentally enslaved to how the world views your image and what the world thinks a powerful image of you is, what the world thinks your most powerful self thinks like, what your most powerful self feels. But the only person who can figure out that is you. And that is why it is important to understand that there is absolutely no system, no program, no celebrity, no fucking industry, there is nothing external in this world that will ever be able to know your value and know your worth. That is something you must know for yourself. You must always understand that no matter what room you walk in, people will always, it doesn't matter. I'm talking about when you're walking into government funding events, when you're walking into charities, when you're walking into seminars, when you're walking into protests, when you're walking into all these places, right? You have to understand that no one will have a greater awareness of your most powerful self except for you. And that any interaction they have with you will be based on the least aware version of who you are, right? And that will be the level of thought that your environment will give to you as an experience of yourself. The lowest version of you that has no awareness of her worth, that does not know her own power, that does not see value in her own voice, that is self-conscious about her hair, that feels like she's a victim of oppression, that feels like this world hates her, that feels like no matter where she goes, she will always be subject to some kind of racist comment. Like, that is the version of you that you must always understand this world will believe you are. And that no matter what room you walk in, you have to understand that people will automatically see you in that way, period. And that within itself is justice. Because once you understand the beliefs, the insecurities, and all of the versions, like all of the thoughts of the version of yourself that is the least self-aware, right? When you become aware of that version of yourself, you will then become your own justice, right? And this is where we get into the concept of justice for a brown girl, right? Like, it does not belong, like, you cannot expect a human being to give you justice, and you cannot expect the world to convince you that they can give you justice, that you guys together can fight for justice. No. Do you want to know what justice is? In its most simple definition, cause and effect. In its most simple fucking definition, it is cause and effect. And that so long as you know the cause of all of your misfortune in your life, and that you understand that all of the effects that you experience in your reality are based on your own thought patterns and your own beliefs and your own feelings, right? You will be able to always be justice, right? It is not a matter of achieving it. It is a matter of being it. Being. If you want justice, you have to be it. And the only way to do that is to understand how everything that you do and everything that you think and everything that you feel creates your experience. And that if you believe you are a victim of oppression, you best believe it is the reason why you go out into the world and you experience oppression, period. And that if in any way you are believing in anyone else's power at all. Like for me, for instance, I was so worthless in my life that I felt there was absolutely nowhere I could ever be happy in this world, so long as this system of government exists, so long as brown kids, brown men, brown girls, brown people of all genders, brown people of all different identities and ways of life are being killed and abused and treated as less than humane. There's no way that I could be happy. There is no way that justice will ever be served, right? But you know what? That creates a feeling of worthlessness. That is what they want you to feel, right? That is the whole point of the system of racism and the system of oppression, is that it creates a pattern of belief that keeps you a victim to it. No matter what, it doesn't matter. People want to think like, oh, the government should be giving us everything. The government this and the government that. At some point, you have to understand that you blaming anything on anyone outside of yourself is the reason why you feel there is a force out to get you. And so for me, I've had to completely acknowledge the fact that, like, I'm going to love Shawn Mendes no matter what. Like, no matter how much darkness I see, no matter how much light I see, because as soon as I take away that love, my awareness of both my most high and my most low self goes to shit. It goes to shit. Because what he represents is a reflection of every fucking thought that I have that keeps me feeling like I am worth nothing at all. And then also the version of me that only sees in him my power to survive. But what genuinely makes it a true learning experience is that he is the complete opposite of me. That we are 100% opposing forces. Because he is male, white, and privileged with authority. And that he is able to be someone that goes into the world and creates all these programs, right, that are intended to work for the highest good. But really, the functioning of it is based on an already existing feeling of worthlessness. And so it is this feeding right on that worthlessness that generates these programs that he's able to set in place, that like allows him to be someone that gives a greater platform and be someone that gives back to the community, because there's already this feeling of worthlessness. But that has to exist in order for him to have the privileges. That has to exist in order for him to feel some kind of ability to succeed, right? It's like there has to be a reflection that he's looking at of a person or an experience of his world where he sees someone who does not feel worth living, or who is hopeless, who is helpless, who is a victim of oppression, right? Like, this has to exist in order for him to be able to reflect on that, right? And use that as a way to feed his own ability to achieve, his ability to succeed and to create something that makes these people feel less like they aren't heard. But that's the thing, like, anything that you feed on, you're sustaining, period. Like, anything that you are consuming, you ultimately become. And I started to realize that a lot of the worthlessness I was feeling was being cured by Shawn, and me seeing everything that he's doing in the world and me believing in him. But it's like, at the same time, I had to realize that I was always like, that was the only way that I could feel some kind of worth, is if I at first was hopeless. Not saying that he's doing any of these things to me, but these are my own internal experiences, right? The way love works is so complex, yet very simple. And that I have to, in a way, stop supporting him if I want my power. That there's no way I could support a man like Sean anymore if I want to fully and wholeheartedly know my power. If I want to completely and wholeheartedly overcome systemic racism and systemic oppression, I have to then no longer support Shawn Mendes at all, because he is feeding on the worthlessness of my people ultimately. And that we have to consistently stay in this state so that he can have his privilege, right? So that he has the privileges, so that he has the beliefs and the thoughts and the condition, and that his environment responds to him in a way that makes him seem able, right? And our environment has to interact with us in a way that makes us seem disabled. One has to exist for the other. And last night I was dreaming and I, like, in my head, there was these, like, lists. There was one of everything that I've learned about my love for Sean, right? And in one of my previous episodes, I kind of talked about, like, thinking that the love that I have for Sean is programmed. And that at some point, I do think that that is, to an extent, true. Because if I want to fully and wholeheartedly understand all of the ways that I am victim to systemic racism, right? That, like, I feel victim to systemic racism and I feel victim to this system of oppression, then some of my love for Sean has to be built on a programming, right? Some kind of belief that keeps me in this state where I feel like whatever he's doing in the world is something to have faith in. But if I'm putting my hope and my faith into him and whatever it is that he's doing, then I am no longer putting that hope into myself. And so it creates this kind of stop in my process of growth, in my process of development, because the world that I live in no longer goes beyond Sean at that point. To expand that, the ability the Black community has, right, to grow no longer goes beyond the system that enslaves them, so long as they are willing to give in to every form of power and exchange of power that feeds on their worthlessness, that feeds on their feeling of being worthless, right? And there's so many things that I was going through last night. So back to my dream, I was talking about how I was feeling, how I was seeing this list of, like, all of the things that I've learned about my, like, the nature of the love that I have for Sean. Like, just because I say that it's programmed doesn't necessarily mean that, like, it doesn't have purpose to me. And that's the thing. Like, even though all of the love that I feel for Sean hurts like hell, it hurts like hell because I feel betrayed. Like, I'm laughing about it for comedic relief, but it really hurts, though. It really does hurt. And I mean, like, that's the thing. I don't feel like justice would be him giving me an apology. And that's where the power comes, right? This is how I know that I have successfully achieved a greater self-awareness and that I genuinely understand my Black girl magic. Is that justice is not him holding himself accountable for anything that I have found is unjust in his actions, and him taking accountability for any of the darkness that I have found within him, but the fact that I can use everything that my love for him has allowed me to understand about the true nature of my reality. That I can take all of that and be able to understand my power, right? Like that at the end of the day, I don't need him to, like I said, to feel responsible for any of the injustice that I feel has been done because of his lack of self-awareness, right? Or because of my lack of self-awareness. Because of the fact that I feel like he has not been fully educated on the nature of systemic racism and how anything that he does that is because like that is inspired by the worthlessness that he sees in the world is literally him sustaining it. That's one. Two, my own lack of understanding of how my own worthlessness, right? Like me feeling worthless and how all of my own thoughts encourage his behavior and how all of my own thoughts allow this system of racism to be successful, how it allows it to work through people like Sean and go completely unnoticed, and that it has an even greater impact, right? That it's not even just about necessarily him and what it is that he's doing, but the generations and the generations and the generations of minds that are conditioned to feel worthlessness, right? To have a thought process and a pattern of belief, a pattern of thought that always allows them to feel like they cannot. And this is what creates privilege, right? If someone will always believe that they cannot, it will always hit the mic. It will always allow for someone who does not experience that same mind. It will give them the power to believe that they can, right? And so in reality, I feel like my love for Sean hurts so bad. What I learned about him is almost like removing knives, you know, that he may not have put in, but that it's more of like loving him has made me realize that they were there. And so it makes it seem like, oh, this love that like I have for him is actually what created them. But no, it's just what created the awareness of them. And that's the thing. Like, that is where I'm saying the power and the justice comes in, because I can look at that and be like, oh, like, fuck you, man. Like, I see all of these knives that have been put in my heart because of this love that like I have for you, and this love that and this support that I have for you. In that moment, I can say that he is a kind of darkness in my life. And then I can say that, oh, he's evil and all of this stuff, and he's a bad man, yada, 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 and all of this stuff. But really, in reality, like, it does the complete opposite. It makes this one of the most true experiences of love that I have in my life. Like, even though he's not a part of it at all, and everything that I am saying about him is all in my own fucking head, okay? Just want to make that clear. I've never had a fucking conversation with Shawn Mendes in my fucking life, but this is how deeply my love for him has already impacted my experience of myself and my awareness of myself. And so, is it right for me to, at that point, stop loving him because it is the love that has created an awareness of my own wounds? It is my love for him that has created an awareness of my own weakness, of my own self-sabotaging thought patterns, and my own self-destructive tendencies, you know? It's like, how then can I possibly say that my love isn't a source of healing, even though it hurts? You know, like, even though, again, like I said, I feel fucking betrayed and I feel like a stupid girl sometimes for all those moments where I loved him more than anything in the world, and I loved myself like I was worth nothing. And that I put into him a reason to live instead of finding within myself the power to be aware of all of the purpose I have that doesn't involve the world at all, that doesn't involve Sean or any of these things, you know. And I think that for me, again, this is like justice, right? This is where the love that I have for Sean creates justice, in that more so what is creating the justice is my choice to recognize it as love. Period. Like, my choice to recognize it as love. There was no way I would have fully gained mastery over the version of myself that feels victimized and that is self-destructive, right? That is internalizing all of this oppression and hating myself and feeling hopeless and feeling like I'm worthless and that my voice doesn't mean anything. Like, there's no way I could have gained mastery and full awareness of that version of myself and her thoughts and her triggers and what makes her so fucking weak, right? Like, there's no way I could have achieved any of that if I didn't have this version of Sean in my head. And I kind of talked about this a little bit in the beginning, but it's almost like the darkness that I see him that I see in him is actually created from my own perspective. In that if I'm seeing a version of him that is feeding on my worthlessness, then there must be a version of me that feels worthless and using his desire to feed on this worthlessness as a way of surviving, a way of coping. But it doesn't actually cure the feeling of hopeless. It doesn't. It just puts a band-aid on it. And for so many months, I'm not even joking, man, so many months I would cry and I would cry and I would cry and I would scream at the sky, I would scream at the universe, I would scream at nature, and I would be like, why do I love him? Like, why? If my love for him does nothing but make me fucking want to die, make me feel worthless, make me feel like I don't fucking matter, and that the world will never be a place where I am seen, where I am heard. Why do I love him? If this is what my love for him is creating as an experience in my life, what the fuck? Like, and why can't I turn it off? Why do I feel completely bound to this worthlessness in my life that is connected to all of the light that I feel, that I sense in this man? And that even just hearing his voice can, like, literally put an image of the sun in my mind. Like, seriously, like, I'm talking about that kind of vitality. It can be seen as emasculating that I'm saying all of these things about him, that I'm trying to devalue his strength and his power to create change in the world, but I'm really not. Genuinely, I just, in reality, like, I want also for an awareness of the version of himself and all men really to be aware of the ways that they feed and how that creates this feeling of hopelessness in the people that they want to help, that it sustains that, because it doesn't create true change in the world, because that change in the world is not in the government or the system that is oppressing them, but in their own minds. And you helping this system by creating the image of it being an oppressor in their head is not helping at all. It just makes them have a lack of ability to feel they can succeed. And so kind of going back to what I was saying, like there would be months and months and months of me screaming, oh my gosh, and I would cry so hard. And I remember like writing in my journal all of the reasons why I had loved Sean, because I couldn't understand. I was just like, I don't really understand where this feeling is coming from. Like, why do I love him, but like I don't fucking know anything about him? Like, make it fucking stop, please. Like, my love for him is making me feel so worthless. And I think it was because I could feel the dream that he's selling, right? Which is global fucking awareness and unity and oneness and equality and all this shit, right? Like, this is the same exact shit that our government is selling, period. But they aren't in any way helping us understand how we can achieve all those things without the need for assistance. And I'm not talking about money. I'm not talking about platforms. I'm talking about self-awareness. For real. And I just felt like he was doing the same exact shit that the government is doing. But I didn't understand it, and it just made me cry and cry and cry and cry. And I swear, like, I would be laying in my bed crying and crying. And because I live next to this street, and I can hear the fucking cars go by, and every car that went by would literally feel like a one-way ticket out of this fucking world. And that those are the kind of impulses that I had to fight from the experience of like genuinely loving Sean, but also simultaneously having this love make me feel like I don't fucking belong. And then I remember writing like this entire thing of poems that were dedicated to him, and I turned them into music. They're on my YouTube channel, and I was so fucking afraid like of posting them, just for me to realize that no one is probably ever going to hear them, that they were really just only for me, and that like the entire experience that I have with Sean, like I said, it's in my head. Like, none of this is really involving a real version of him, like other than that which I perceive psychically. So I wrote this entire thing of poems to explain all the reasons why I love him and how the love makes me feel, and all of the reasons that I support him, everything that attracts me to him, and everything that makes me feel enslaved by this love. And I remember starting out by like just writing a whole bunch of gratitude. Like, if you really want to know why you support someone, write a list of gratitude. And so I started with writing this like prayer of gratitude, and just saying and just being grateful, and really getting to the root of like all of the reasons why a brown girl like me would support someone like Sean. And one, it was because he made me proud to feel brown, and which I think already within itself I was struggling with, because there was no brown person that had succeeded, you know. Like, even my own reflection, there was no brown person that had convinced me or could convince me that being brown was of worth. I hated being brown. I hated it so much. I hated it, and I hated it, and I hated it, and I wished that I was no longer existing, because I felt like I had no fucking voice. I felt worthless. And this is what I'm saying. Like, these are all of the feelings that I feel like are being fed on by our system of government. These feelings, right? Yeah, there was no brown person who could convince me that like being brown fucking mattered. I don't give a fuck. There was no one. No, none. I don't care how much vigor you had as a brown person. I don't care how strong your message was, how powerful you sounded. It didn't matter. There was nothing, no one, no brown person that could convince me. No one except for Sean. Like, even people who are just like Sean, people of other cultures, and it, like, there was no one, period. It doesn't matter what race, ethnicity, culture, background, it doesn't matter. Sean was the only person in my life that had ever made me feel like my brown skin was worth living in. And that by itself was already like deep. Like that just plain and simple, like nothing else connected to it, but within him I had gained a desire to find value in my brown skin, that it was worth looking at my reflection and seeing a human, you know, as opposed to a victim, or as opposed to anything less than a human fucking being. To look at my reflection and define her with respect, you know, and honor and dignity, like that was something that loving Sean and supporting Sean had gave to me. So yeah, I made this entire thing of poems that I honestly would have kept to myself and would have just kept in my journal. But there's something about the expression and putting something out into the world that really gives it full power to liberate, like that truly gives it, that truly gives art. That's what I want to say, more so like art gets, it becomes more of a healing kind of force in your life, at least for me, when it is shared, when it is put out into the world and it becomes a part of your experience of your environment, and you can see like something that you've created internally be fully manifested and realized in your external world. Because I think for me it just shows evidence of growth and evidence of some kind of self-discovery that is happening, you know, and life, evidence of life, just period, you know, that you are living and that you are learning and that you are experiencing. And I think that that is important. So the more I sat with that art and I sat with that art and I sat with that art, the more it turned really dark, because I then had to understand that no matter, like, I don't know what it is, but no matter how much he helped, like loving Sean helped me increase in value, and no matter how much light that I saw in him, I still felt worthless. And that I had to keep on finding light in him. I had to keep on searching for light in him, keep on searching and searching and searching for like meaning in him. And I was finding it too. But no matter how much of it I found, I still ended up having suicidal thoughts. And I think I had only truly overcame those thoughts when I started, again, like being vocal about the love that I feel for Sean and the light that I find in him. I wasn't able to truly like get past the darkness that I was seeing in myself unless I could like verbally and outwardly express the light that I found in him. So I was doing this for a really long time, just making a lot of art about Sean and expressing it outwardly so that I could get it out, because this, I don't know like really how it works. It is just the power of yin and yang, really. It is just how the universe works. It's one of those things where like I was just being guided, right? In that at this point in my life, loving this man was the only thing that was keeping me fucking alive. It was the only thing that prevented me from looking in the mirror and saying, you fucking deserve to die. Like, seriously. I had spent so much time, like, seeing in Sean all the light everything that I loved about him was everything that I felt I could potentially be, or something that, like, I believed a human being worth loving could have, or what their personality would be like, XYZ, right? So I spent a lot of time just doing that, practicing what it felt like to see the light in someone who I felt extremely connected to. And I think that over time, that's allowed me to be able to do that exact same thing within myself, like look beyond the surface. And I finally have transitioned into the version of myself that is able to see within everything that I saw, like within myself, everything that I saw in Sean. When you are approached or in the presence of an oppressor, right? And the thing is that what we are taught to do is immediately be on defense, right? Like, we are taught that when we get into the presence of like an oppressor, that we take a stand. If it's one thing that I learned, is to not go in it trying to take a stand, because you also have to understand that, like, a lot of people, like, when you are in the presence of an oppressor, when you are in the presence of someone who is racist, right, and who may have prejudiced beliefs about you, whether they are a police officer, whether they are a man at the fucking Starbucks getting coffee, or whether you're on the road, it doesn't matter. If you're in a fucking friendship with them, a relationship, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, like, what you want to teach them is that you are worth a human, that your worth is equivalent to that of a human, not you are equivalent to a person of this race, or you are equivalent to this culture, or you should be respected as XYZ. No, the basis, right? True equality, right? If you genuinely want justice, you need to be able to act in a way that presents to them an experience of you being equivalent to a human, right? Because a lot of people who have racist thoughts, racist beliefs, oppressive thought patterns, right? These are people who do not see within their opposition a worth of being human. It doesn't fucking matter the value or the meaning that you give to your skin or your culture. It literally doesn't matter. What you want to represent, right? Like, how you, if you really want to take a stand, you need to not go into it with previously conceived assumptions about this person and yourself. Also, like, do not go into it with a background of being traumatized. Do not go into it with a background of being enslaved. Like, obviously, I'm not saying to completely forget about your history. I am saying do not allow your history to define you. Let it go. You want to 100% create a state of purity, right? Like, you want to only be innocent as you can. And the only way that innocence is going to be accomplished is if you do not equate yourself to anything else than a human being. Not your skin color, not your culture, not your background, not your history, not the generations of systematic oppression and injustice. Do not relate yourself to any of those things, because they do not represent who you are. That is not the equivalent to your true value and your true worth. What you want them to understand is that you are a human. That is the common ground. That is the ground that you stand, you being human, period. And that is the safest stance to take. Not that you stand on this side of oppression, or you have this opinion, or you have experienced this in the news, or you've had this happen to you. I don't give a fuck. You want to, at the very basic value, present yourself as a human. And one of the ways that you can achieve this is eye contact, right? You may fear looking them in their face. Look at them in their eyes and do not break eye contact, so help me God. Look at them in their eyes, because this is the only part of themselves that is actually connecting their external world to the life within them. Their eyes. Look at them in their eyes, right? This is where the life within you and the life within them connects. And if you are unwilling to look at them in their eyes, that already can create a state of fear. And again, we do not want to fear these people, because fear is not freedom, right? Fear is not human, period. Fear is not a state of being alive. No, you want to seem as alive as possible, as full of vitality and awareness, consciousness as you possibly can. And the way to do that is to connect yours with theirs by looking them in their eyes and not breaking eye contact. I don't care. You can look away for a blink, okay? But it is best to keep your eyes on their eyes. This lets them know that you are present and that you see them. The control in an environment that is completely unpredictable will not be based on how much you fear things going in a very unpredictable way, but everything that you do to make sure that you are in a state of knowing how your actions, how everything that you do contributes to the way things go. So that's my first tip, eye contact. And aligned with this eye contact, oh man, this is probably the best piece of advice I could give to any brown being at all. In action. Do not move. Do not move. I don't care. Do not try to set things up. Do not try to make the situation look good. Do not reach for anything. Do not. In action. In action. Through the process of an action, there is purification. If you do not move at all, I don't care. Do not move until you are guided. Period. There is that eye contact and in action. In action is one of the most high principles of the universe, of nature. One of the most high principles of nature is this concept of an action. And that so long as you're willing to do nothing at all, you will be in control over every part of yourself that has the potential to act out of fear or to act out of ignorance and to act in a way that does not benefit your most high good. Inaction. What does inaction look like? Again, I will repeat it. No movement. Do not try to assume that you setting something or you having any hand movements or that you moving your head or you moving your body or any of that. Do not move and always make eye contact in action. Pure in action. Right? And just to keep it short for these, even though this has been a pretty long episode. 3, the truth. Truthfully, that is the only form of innocence, right? I don't care how horrible that truth sounds. You tell the truth, period. Because if you don't tell the truth now, it will find a way to kill you. If you do not bring it into the light. Tell your truth in the most sincere way you know how. This will also eliminate your fear and your assumption that you are powerless in this situation and that you are a victim. Your truth will be the only thing that gives you innocence, that makes your actions innocent, that gives you a value of being worth life. Because the thing is, it's not just you believing that you are innocent because you think that your oppressor is guilty of some kind of injustice that was done before y'all had came into contact. Your innocence should be based on your expression of truth only, not on any assumption that you make of anybody else, right? Because that will be the only thing that keeps your heart connected to your mind and your mind connected to your soul. And that in every possible way you have self-control, that you have self-discipline, and that you are aware of how everything that you do is impacting your environment, and that you take every single precaution necessary to not put yourself in danger. And then also reaction, like you cannot assume that this person has some kind of training that teaches them not to violate you, right? Or not to violate your self-esteem, or to have any type of boundary. Like, you cannot expect that. That is why you practice inaction, because at that moment, every action that is taken is based on their force, not yours. It creates a system of balance, right? You were then able to have balance and not be blindsided by a lack of control because you are using your own force. No, the only way you'll be able to fully and wholeheartedly master responding to your oppressor in a way that teaches them your value is if you do not manipulate the situation in any way, shape, or form.